All right, hi everybody. So for this bonus step, what we're going to be doing is setting up an enemy spawner. Like usual for most of the enemy stuff we're testing, we're going to set this up in our base scene, but then we're going to hopefully be able to move that over to one of our dungeon levels. So we're going to test it here, and then you'll delete it and move it over once you do your check setup stuff and get credit for everything. So what we need to do is start by just creating an empty game object in our scene. I fortunately already have one here, but just to show you guys how to do that, you just right click in your hierarchy and hit create empty. And then we're going to call this enemy spawner, just like that. Next up, what we want to do is hit the add component button here on this game object and hit new script and type enemy spawner, like so. Before we get into actually writing the script, let's go ahead and go to our assets folder, go to find that script we just created, move it into resources, move it into scripts, and move it into created. Once we have it in our created folder, let's go ahead and open the spawner up. We've got a good chunk of code here we got to write, so we're going to kind of go quickly, but I'll explain things as we go here. So to start, what we need to do is add some variables at the top. We need a public game object array, which is like a bucket of game objects essentially. And we're going to fill that with enemy prefab. So any type of enemy we want to spawn, we're going to put it here. Next up, we want to add a public float spawn time. That's going to control how long it takes for each enemy to spawn. You can adjust this, of course, in the inspector, but we want to set it to 10f here in our script. Next variable is going to be another public float. We're going to call it spawn range. This is going to determine how far away the player has to be from the spawner in order for the spawner to start, sorry about that, to start spawning. Next, we're going to add a private variable without that public keyword called bool spawning. This is going to just track whether or not our spawner is currently spawning objects. We don't want to start up a bunch of spawn processes and have them overlap with each other. And then finally, we need a transform variable for player that's just going to track where our player is in the world. In the start method, we're going to actually get the reference to our player's transform. So we're going to say player equals game object.find, and then an open close parentheses, player in quotation marks there. That's going to find the player game object located somewhere in our scene. And then we're going to say dot transform. And then we'll drop down here into void update. We're going to add a conditional statement in here, checking the distance between the spawner and our player. So we're going to say if vector3 dot distance, distance, then in parentheses transform dot position, comma player dot position is less than spawn range. So the distance between our spawner and our player is less than that spawn range. Then we want to check and say, well, if they're closer and we are not spawning, we check that by putting the exclamation point in front of the Boolean value there. We're going to say or set spawning to true. So this code inside this if spawning will only run if spawning is false. So when we set spawning to true, we guarantee that we won't run this code a second time. And then we want to start a coroutine, which we haven't written yet. That's going to be called, not coroutine, coroutine. And that coroutine we're going to write is going to be called spawn enemy, open and close parentheses like that. Next, we'll drop down below and we'll add an if or an else statement. And we'll say if spawning. So this is if we are spawning and the player moves outside of our spawn range. Then we want to set spawning to false, and we want to stop all coroutines. That's just going to stop our spawn coroutine from continuing to loop. Now down here at the bottom, we're going to add our coroutine to actually spawn the enemies. So we're going to add an I enumerator, not enumerable. It also helps to spell it correctly. We're going to call this spawn enemy, like I said. Add our curly brackets there, and then we're going to say game object, with a capital G, game object, new enemy, equals instantiate game object, just like so. And then inside the parentheses here, we're going to say enemy prefabs, so that array of prefabs from the top. And then in the square bracket, we're going to say random.range, 0 to enemy prefabs, enemy prefabs.length, and then a semicolon at the end. So that's going to spawn a new enemy, and it's going to pick a random one out of our array. We're going to set our new enemy's transform.position equal to our transform.position. And then we're going to yield return new, wait 4 seconds, spawn time. So what that's going to do is basically tell our code in this coroutine to just pause for the total amount of time equal to our spawn time, and currently that's set to 10 seconds. So it's going to basically, when it hits that line, it's going to pause for 10 seconds, and then it's going to start up a new coroutine, the same one. It's just going to loop itself over and over until we get to the stop all coroutines method. Once you've got that done, go ahead and save the script, head back over to Unity, and select your enemy spawner. And then select our enemy spawner. And then up here, we'll see those three variables we made, that spawn time and spawn range. You're welcome to tweak these values as much as you want. And then we have our enemy prefabs here to pick from. So I only have the 2 enemies that came with my snow environment, so I'm just going to set this to 2. You can set this number as high as you'd like and use as many enemies as you'd like. No restrictions here. So I'm going to go to my environments folder, snow, prefabs, and enemies. Enemy spawner, I'm going to drag each of those in one at a time. Oops. Enemy spawner, just like that. Hit the play button now. And then we should be able to test this. If I walk over, leave my spawners somewhere in this general area, we'll get, there we go, there's an enemy. So we'll just run around for 10 seconds, just let this guy kind of follow us. And there's another one. So there you go. Now you can, of course, save this. You're welcome to make a prefab out of this. You don't have to. All you have to do to make a new one in one of your world scenes is just make an empty object and add this script to it. But of course, like I said, you're welcome to drag this into your project folder to make a prefab if you feel like you want to be able to reuse this a bunch. And then, of course, you want to put this in your dungeon scenes rather than just in your base scene. And of course, also make sure you check your setup in your base scene before you actually move that over to another scene. But yeah, once you've got that done, you've got those prefabs in there and tested, go ahead and save your scene.